Let's move on, as I've said, to the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps. Now, Mr Shapps, these words I'm about to quote will be very familiar to you. The Downing Street parties were described as, and here's the quote, utterly disgraceful, and here's the other quote, with others saying that they had no sympathy with people who have those parties.
And Mr Shapps, those were your own words, in fact, on our programme back in December. You've just heard Emma, eloquent, grieving. He must resign. You must yourself be furious with the Prime Minister because you've spoken with such empathy about your own dad on this programme many times, and yet you have to be here this morning, what, to defend the Prime Minister not resigning?
Morning. Yeah, first of all, to hear Emma's story about Ruby is horrendous. And as you rightly say, I was on your programme at the time and I couldn't see my own dad and we thought we'd lost him. It was 4 months of him in hospital, and we're following the rules very, very closely to the letter, in fact. And I recognise from my own experience, as well as many other people's, just how horrendous that whole period of time was, and how what therefore happened in Downing Street over that time was completely wrong, very disappointing, and I think it was misguided of anyone to ever think that it would somehow be okay. I think it's right the Prime Minister has apologised. He's accepted responsibility. He's paid that fixed penalty notice of £50 fine, and he's gone on to overhaul Number 10 and the way that operates as well, reformed it so that nothing like that could happen again. Not that we ever want to be in lockdowns again. I listened to his statement very, very closely last night when he outlined what happened during the day in question. 8 different meetings, including in the room, in the cabinet room, where this surprise happened as well. But he had 8 separate meetings with the same members of staff, largely, went out to visit a school. He was full on dealing with COVID during a period where he himself had not long before been in hospital in a life or death situation from what was a very serious disease. So no, I've not come on to defend anything that's happened. I feel it very personally for the reasons that you've expressed. But I do think it's right that he's apologised, that he's accepted responsibility, and that he's...
Well, isn't accepting responsibility to resign? You've heard Emma say that there. There are so many people this morning who feel mortified by what was going on at Number 10. Are you comfortable, Grant Shapps, with having a law-breaking Prime Minister?
It's interesting you use the word mortified, because I spoke to the Prime Minister last night about this. His words is embarrassed. He recognises it was stupid and indefensible, and that he himself is mortified by what happened. I mean, clearly, he didn't arrange a surprise for himself. He walks into the cabinet room where people were wishing him happy birthday, people he'd been with earlier in the day when he held, amongst other things, emergency COVID.
He's not mortified enough to step down, is he? So one questions how mortified a man really is. I mean, he said in his statement last night, I have to say in all frankness that at the time it did not occur to me that this might have been a breach of the rules. This was the man who at 5 p.m. every night told everybody to stick to the rules, told grandparents when their 18-year-old granddaughter was dying that you must not go and see her. There's somebody on here, Elaine, who says that her husband died from a bleed on the brain and then got COVID. Her son lives 300 miles away and he had to watch the funeral on Zoom. How can a man stay in position when these people were sacrificing their love? They were sacrificing the love they had. And yet Boris Johnson feels mortified but can't resign?
As I said, I completely feel the sense of anguish over it because of our own family situation at the time. He'd met with the same individuals earlier in the day in the same room. It's his birthday. They wish him happy birthday. It shouldn't have happened, and it's right that he's accepted full responsibility, paid the fine, 50 quid, and got on with reforming Number 10. I suppose, to answer your question, though, from a personal point of view, what I look at is somebody's motives. Did somebody set out to do something in malice? Were they looking to avoid or break the rules or the law? Or was it something that occurred in error? And it seems obvious and clear to me that in this case, he walks into a room where his staff say, happy birthday. He didn't set out to make that happen. It happened in error. We're all human. We all make mistakes.
But the investigations don't end there, do they?
All right, Mr. Shapps, it's quite clear, I think, to anybody watching this interview that you're very uncomfortable, and I'm not surprised, based on your own personal experience involving your father. But it's also clear that you've reached the decision up here to forgive the Prime Minister on a personal level. You accept that he's mortified and you have forgiven him. But we are only talking about this one fine in this one-party investigation. As you will know, there are a possibility of 6 more fines coming down the tracks to the Prime Minister. We don't know that for certain yet, but it is quite widely predicted that there will be other parties, the cheese and wine party in the garden at number 10, for example, more severe breaches, if you like, of the code, more egregious examples. How much longer can you keep accepting his mortification and apology for? Because there was an analogy given on this programme a couple of hours ago by Edwina Currie, the former Conservative minister. She likened what's happened to a speeding fine, and you pay the fine and you move on. But, of course, if you accumulate speeding fines, you get banned. You're no longer allowed to drive the car. Do you think there'll come a point, if there are further, if you like, guilty verdicts and more cheques that Mr Johnson has to sign to pay these fines, that his position just becomes, like a constantly convicted driver, untenable?
Yeah, I mean, look, whilst I accept it's a fixed penalty notice and like a speeding fine, I don't accept that it's of the same significance. Of course, it's much more significant than that, and I wouldn't want to accept. I don't agree with those comments that it's just like a speeding fine. It's not, clearly. But I think probably to answer the wider question, I think it's important to look at the man in the whole. It's not just this specific thing, it's actually what he was doing at the time, now nearly 2 years ago, which was actually helping this country to be the first country in the world to be able to jab people with vaccinations. We had, Margaret Keenan was the first person in the world to have a jab that was actually properly approved. We then rolled it out to the population as a whole before others. We then did the booster before everyone else. We then got out of coronavirus before everyone.
I know people hate me interrupting. People hate me interrupting. That's all I get on Twitter. But I'm going to say to you, I'm so sorry to interrupt. But there are consultants, there are people in A&E, there were nurses who were also playing their part in saving people's lives, and they stuck to the rules. No cakes, no parties, no socialising, sitting in cars at 4 a.m, can't get food on the shelves. That's what those people experience. Boris Johnson is no sole hero in this pandemic. There are real-life heroes who are out there who stuck to the rules.
I don't disagree with any of that. The simple point I was trying to make is that when you judge a person, you have to judge everything about them, and from the work that was done during the pandemic itself, through to the work that's been done in building the economy back afterwards, the fastest growing economy in the G7, the ability for the economy to employ people. The most important thing is that people have livelihoods and jobs, to what's going on at the moment in the defence of Ukraine. And so I judge this man in the round for everything that he does, rather than for one specific thing. In this case, walking into the cabinet room where others wish him happy birthday, in an office that he works in all day long, and had already met with them as well earlier in the day. So it was wrong. He's apologised. I understand that he is absolutely mortified by it, because I've spoken to him and he's made that very clear. But I don't think he...
Mr. Shapps, I too am sorry to interrupt, but I think you've sort of completed that point. There's just one more question that we have to put to you. We know that the ministerial code states explicitly that any minister, including a Prime Minister, has to resign if they knowingly mislead Parliament. Now, we've been talking about the fines, we've been talking about his admission of guilt in terms of Partygate, but we also know that he stood up and told Parliament that no rules had been broken, and they clearly had on multiple occasions. Do you feel, being honest, and I know you're batting on a sticky wicket this morning, do you feel that the Prime Minister has a case to answer in terms of lying to Parliament?
No, because I don't think he knowingly broke the laws when he came to Parliament. We now know that the Metropolitan Police have said that he shouldn't have stepped into the cabinet room when staff had organised a surprise. But I don't think he, when he came to Parliament thinking that breached the rules. And indeed, we know, because the Metropolitan Police have fined some people who were there and haven't fined other people who were there, that there clearly is a judgment that's made in those things.
Grant Shapps, thank you so much for joining us on the programme this morning.